Chapter 1. The stagecoach lurched over another rut in the road, sending Abigail Thornton sliding across the leather seat. She steadied herself against the wooden paneling, grateful for the sturdy construction of her traveling ensemble. Outside the window, Wyoming Territory's rugged landscape stretched towards snow-capped mountains that gave way to spring-green valleys below. "Miss Thornton! A proper lady does not sprawl so indecorously," Mrs. Lavinia Hargrove chided, adjusting her own posture despite the vehicle's violent motion. Her former governess, now hired as traveling companion, seemed determined to maintain Boston propriety despite their frontier surroundings. "My apologies, Mrs. Hargrove," Abigail replied, straightening her skirts. At 24, she hardly needed such supervision, but her aunt in Denver had insisted upon a chaperone for the journey west. The last 3 months had transformed Abigail's life from comfortable certainty to desperate improvisation. Her father's death following accusations of embezzlement had left her virtually penniless, her family name tarnished, and her future in Boston society untenable. Only Aunt Constance's invitation to Denver offered any prospect of respectable survival. Abigail's fingers sought the cameo brooch at her collar, her mother's final gift before succumbing to influenza 4 years earlier. The smooth ivory offered familiar comfort amid strange surroundings. "We'll arrive in Silver Creek within the hour," announced Harold Whitcomb, the pompous banker seated opposite them. He consulted an elaborate pocket watch before securing the strong box beside him. "The payroll for the Consolidated Mining Company, $5,000. I'll transfer it to the local bank immediately." "Mighty big sum to be advertising, mister," observed Elias Cooper, an elderly man returning with his wife Martha from visiting their daughter. "Especially with the Blackwell gang working these parts." "Blackwell gang?" Mrs. Hargrove's hand fluttered to her throat. "Surely the authorities have such criminals well in hand." James Fredericks, a mining investor with oddly fine clothing for frontier travel, chuckled. "Territorial law is spread thin, madam. Blackwell's outlaws have robbed 3 coaches in as many months." From his perch driving the team, Tobias Old Toby Miller called down, "Approaching Hangman's Pass, folks. Named for the ambush that claimed 6 travelers in '69. Mrs. Hargrove gasped in horror while young Will Simmons, riding shotgun guard, nervously checked his weapon. Abigail remained silent, heart quickening despite herself. She would never admit it, but the dime novels hidden in her trunk had painted the West as a place of danger and adventure, a stark contrast to Boston drawing rooms. While she certainly didn't wish for an encounter with outlaws, the possibility added a forbidden thrill to their journey. As the stagecoach labored up the steep, narrow mountain pass, pine forests crowding close on both sides, Abigail glimpsed something unusual through the window. A large tree trunk blocking the path ahead. "Oh, there!" Old Toby pulled the team to a halt, concern evident in his weathered face. "Why are we stopping?" Whitcomb demanded, clutching the strong box tighter. Abigail's answer died in her throat as 5 riders emerged from the trees, bandanas concealing their faces, weapons drawn. "This here's a robbery," shouted one. "Everybody out! Hands where we can see 'em!" "Everyone out!" The masked leader's command cut through the shocked silence inside the stagecoach. "Gentlemen first, then the ladies. Slowly now." Unlike his companions, the leader maintained perfect control, his black duster coat settling around him as he sat tall on a powerful stallion. His eyes, visible above his bandana, assessed the situation with unnerving calm. Harold Whitcomb clutched the strong box protectively. "Now, see here," he began, but James Fredericks laid a restraining hand on his arm. "Don't be foolish," Fredericks murmured. The exchange struck Abigail as oddly familiar for supposedly unacquainted travelers. As the male passengers disembarked, Abigail observed the outlaws more carefully. Besides the leader, she identified 2 similar-looking men, brothers perhaps, with matching wild eyes and trigger fingers that seemed overly eager. An older, grizzled man methodically searched the gentleman, while a silent figure with darker skin remained slightly apart, watching the surroundings rather than the passengers. "Ladies, your turn," the leader called, his voice surprisingly educated. Mrs. Hargrove moaned faintly. "I shall not. It's most improper." "Mrs. Hargrove," Abigail whispered urgently, "impropriety is preferable to being shot." Outside, Will Simmons foolishly reached for his weapon. A shot rang out from one of the Wildbone brothers, and the young guard clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. The leader dismounted to assist the ladies from the coach. His eyes met Abigail's briefly as she descended, startlingly blue and intelligent above his mask. For an instant, she felt he was memorizing her face. Mrs. Hargrove was halfway out when she sagged dramatically. "I feel faint, the vapors!" She collapsed against the outlaw leader, forcing him to catch her substantial weight. In the confusion, Abigail's skirt caught on the coach step and hitched up several inches, revealing the money pouch sewn into her petticoat, a precaution her father had insisted upon. The sun glinted unmistakably on the coins within. "Well, well," drawled the wild-eyed outlaw. "Looks like the pretty lady's been holding out." He reached for Abigail with dirty fingers. "Let's see what other treasures you're hiding, darling." "Step back, Jim," the leader ordered sharply. Boss, I'm just being thorough." Jem's hand moved to the knife at his belt. "I like spirited fillies." Suddenly, Fredericks pulled a small derringer from a hidden pocket and fired at the leader. The bullet grazed his upper arm, tearing through the duster's fabric. The leader returned fire instinctively, his shot catching Fredericks in the shoulder. Chaos erupted. Mrs. Hargrove's feigned faint became genuine as she collapsed completely. Old Toby made a desperate lunge for the reins but was clubbed by one of the outlaws. "Nobody move," the leader commanded despite his injury. "Jem, the strong box. Now." Jem wrenched the strong box from Whitcomb, but his eyes returned to Abigail. Not quite everything. He lunged forward and grabbed her arm. "I'm claiming a bonus." "Let her go," the leader ordered. "This isn't the plan." "Plans change," Jem sneered. "Been a while since we had female company at camp." The implication sent ice through Abigail's veins. She struggled, stomping hard on his instep. Jem's response was to backhand her across the cheek. The leader's gun shifted to point directly at Jem. Another shot rang out. From Whitcomb this time, distracting everyone momentarily. The leader spurred his horse forward, leaned low in the saddle, and in one powerful motion, scooped Abigail from Jem's grasp. "Anyone follows, she dies first," he called, wheeling his mount away. "Stop struggling," he muttered as they galloped away. "You'll fall and break your neck, as opposed to being kidnapped by outlaws," Abigail retorted, though she ceased fighting as the dizzying mountain drop-off made the danger clear. They rode for several miles, the leader expertly guiding his horse through maze-like trails. Only when they were well away did he slow to a more sustainable pace. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his tone softer than before. "Other than being abducted?" "No." Abigail touched her stinging cheek. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere safe." He guided the horse around a tight bend. "Safe? With outlaws?" "Safer than you would have been with Jem, believe me." Genuine revulsion colored his voice. As they continued through increasingly remote terrain, he unexpectedly murmured, "Stop fighting. I'm not who you think I am." The cryptic statement jolted Abigail fully alert, but before she could question him, hoofbeats approached. Two other gang members, the grizzled older man and the silent tracker, joined them, leading a pack horse loaded with the stolen strongbox. Chapter 2. The hidden canyon opened before them like a secret valley. Steep walls rose on three sides, their surfaces painted crimson by the setting sun. A small stream trickled along one edge, feeding a stand of cottonwoods. 5 crude cabins formed a rough semicircle around a central fire pit, with a corral for horses against the northern wall. Abigail's initial impression was one of unexpected orderliness. Woodpiles stood neatly stacked. A clothesline stretched between trees held drying garments. The lingering aroma of coffee and wood smoke perfumed the air. A stocky woman emerged from the largest cabin, wiping her hands on a stained apron. "Lord Almighty, Lucas, what have you gone and done now?" "Wasn't planned, Maisie," the leader replied, pulling down his bandana to reveal a strong jawline with several days' growth of beard. "Circumstances changed." "Circumstances always change when Jem's involved," Maisie retorted, approaching Abigail with frank curiosity. "You all right, girl? They didn't rough you up too bad, did they?" The unexpected concern momentarily robbed Abigail of speech. She straightened her spine, drawing upon years of social training. "I am unharmed, thank you." "Miss Thornton will need a place to stay," Lucas instructed. "The back cabin. Is it habitable?" "I've been using it for storage, but there's a bed frame." Maisie assessed Abigail with a practical eye. "She'll need clothes, too. Can't have her prancing around in that get-up. Now what happened to you, Lucas? You're bleeding." "Yeah, I took it in the shoulder. It isn't bad, but it'll need some fixing." Lucas then helped Abigail down off his horse. "Why don't you both come into the cabin? I ain't no doctor, but I can fix up a scratch." Maisie's voice was reassuring. The cabin was surprisingly comfortable, with braided rugs covering the rough-hewn floor and colorful quilts adorning the walls. Lucas eased out of his duster coat, wincing slightly as the blood stain on his sleeve was revealed. "You'll need to take off the bandana from your arm and remove your shirt," Maisie said, adopting a professional tone. As the wound was exposed, it was apparent that the bullet was not just a grazer, but had penetrated more than expected. As Maisie was trying to evaluate her next move, Abigail chimed in. "That's not just a scratch," she informed them. "It's going to need a good cleaning first, and possibly stitches." "And who are you to decide such?" Maisie demanded, her hands on her hips. "My mother was a hospital nurse during the war. I learned from her." "I don't think it's a good idea," Lucas began to say with a frown. "Nonsense," the older woman interrupted, looking relieved. "The girl said she has medical experience. That's more than what I got. Besides, I need to sort out her sleeping arrangements." Alone with Lucas, Abigail felt the impropriety of the situation but focused on the wound. "This will hurt," she warned, pouring whiskey onto a cloth. "Not my first bullet," he replied with grim humor. As she dressed his wound, Abigail decided to use this moment of vulnerability. "Mr. Fredericks seemed particularly determined to shoot you. Why?" Lucas's expression hardened. "Like I said before, you ask too many questions. And I'm currently preparing to sew your flesh together. I believe that earns me some answers." A reluctant smile tugged at his mouth. "Fredericks is a business rival. He wasn't just any passenger. He knew about the robbery in advance," Abigail concluded. Lucas's eyes focused. "You're observant. Dangerous quality in a hostage." Later that evening, Abigail was escorted to a small cabin at the back of the compound. The humble space contained a narrow bed, a three-legged stool, and little else. Mysteriously, she found a small fruit knife with a mother-of-pearl handle tucked beneath her pillow. Protection against Jem, she presumed, though woefully inadequate. Through the thin walls, she heard male voices raised in argument. Lucas and Jem, the latter demanding access to the Boston lady. Lucas's deeper tones responded with unmistakable authority, ending with what sounded like a physical altercation and stomping footsteps. When silence finally settled over the camp, Abigail explored her prison more thoroughly. Under the mattress, her fingers discovered a small leather-bound journal. Opening it by moonlight, she found desperate entries from a previous captive, warnings about gang members, especially Jem, and someone named Blackwell. Unsettled, she returned the journal to its hiding place and prepared for an uneasy night's sleep, wondering about Lucas's cryptic statement during their ride. "Not who you think I am. What could an outlaw possibly mean by such words?" Dawn brought a soft knock at Abigail's door. Maisie entered with a bundle of clothing and a basin of water. "Thought you might want to freshen up. Brought some of my things. Altered them best I could last night." "Thank you." Abigail accepted the simple skirt and blouse gratefully. "Your kindness is unexpected." Maisie snorted. "Not everyone in this camp is animal. Like Jem Parker." She lowered her voice. "Lucas says you're to help me with cooking duties. Keeps you under his eye, away from trouble." "And when might I expect to be released?" Abigail asked, trying to sound casual. Something flickered across Maisie's weathered face. "That depends on Blackwell." "Blackwell?" "Gang leader, real leader. Lucas just runs things when Blackwell's away on business. Maisie glanced toward the door. He returns in 4 days. Word of advice: make yourself useful, keep your head down, and pray Lucas can convince Blackwell you're worth more alive than dead. The stark assessment chilled Abigail to the bone. Throughout the day, as she helped Maisie prepare meals for the gang, she observed the camp's dynamics carefully. Lucas maintained control through a combination of physical prowess and strategic intelligence. Jem and his brother Theo constantly challenged his authority, but stopped short of outright rebellion. The older outlaw Hank watched everything with calculating eyes, while Reed, the half-Cherokee tracker, came and went silently, spending more time outside the canyon than within. 3 days into her captivity, Abigail attempted escape during pre-dawn hours. She'd managed to slip past her cabin guard and was scaling the canyon wall when a hand closed around her ankle. Looking down, she found Lucas staring up at her. "Impressive," he said, sounding genuinely admiring rather than angry. "But foolish. These trails are patrolled by Reed. Even if you'd made it over the ridge, you'd be lost in wilderness with predators, both animal and human." Instead of punishment, he escorted her to his cabin under the pretense of having her clean it. Once inside, he closed the door and spoke in urgent whispers. "I need you to trust me," he began, his blue eyes intense in the morning light. "I'm working to get you safely away from here, but it must be carefully timed." "Why should I trust an outlaw?" Abigail challenged. "Because I didn't let Jem take you. Because I've kept you safe these 3 days. I joined this gang under complicated circumstances. I'm looking for a way out that doesn't end with a bullet in my back." "And I'm your ticket?" Abigail asked, skepticism evident. "You could be." He leaned closer. "Blackwell returns soon. He eliminates complications without hesitation. Before he arrives, I intend to leave with you and enough of the stolen money to start fresh elsewhere." Abigail studied him, trying to discern truth from manipulation. "That doesn't explain why Fredericks specifically targeted you during the robbery." Something flickered in Lucas's eyes. "Respect, perhaps?" "You don't miss much, do you? Fredericks works security for Sterling Mining. There's bad blood between us from a previous encounter." Before she could press further, a commotion outside interrupted them. Riders were approaching, outsiders scouting the canyon. The next hour dissolved into chaos as Lucas organized the gang's defense against what appeared to be a rival outlaw faction. During the brief skirmish, Abigail found herself trapped behind the woodpile as bullets splintered logs around her. Suddenly Lucas was there, shielding her with his body. A sharp cry escaped him as a bullet grazed his side. He had been hit again. When the attackers retreated, Abigail helped Lucas to her cabin while Maisie was tending to another injured man. As she cleaned Lucas's fresh wound, the vulnerability of his position seemed to break down some barrier between them. "My real name is Lucas Reed," he said softly, grimacing as she pressed a cloth against his bleeding side. "I gathered Lucas was genuine," she replied. "Your compatriots use it too freely for it to be false. You're not like any Boston society lady I've encountered." "You've encountered many, have you?" Abigail raised an eyebrow, continuing her ministrations. His laugh transformed into a pained hiss. "More than you might expect." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Lucas leaned forward slightly, his gaze dropping to her lips. Abigail found herself swaying toward him, propriety forgotten in the aftermath of danger. The cabin door burst open. Hank stood there. "Riders spotted heading this way," he announced. "One matches Blackwell's description." Lucas straightened, the moment shattered. "He's early. Get everyone prepared." After Hank departed, Lucas turned back to Abigail, urgency in his voice. "Whatever happens next, whatever you see or hear, remember one thing. I will get you safely away from here. Play along with whatever I say." "Lucas," she began, but he was already moving toward the door. "Trust me, Abigail," he said, using her given name for the first time. "Your life depends on it." Chapter 3. That night, unable to sleep with thoughts of Blackwell's impending arrival, Abigail returned to the hidden journal. Examining it more closely, she realized the encoded entries weren't from a previous captive, but appeared to be detailed notes on the gang's operations: dates, amounts, locations. Who would keep such records? A soft scratch at her window startled her. Lucas's face appeared in the moonlight. He gestured urgently for her to join him outside. "What are you?" she began when she slipped through the door. "No time," he interrupted, leading her toward the creek where the rushing water would mask their conversation. "Blackwell's arrival changes everything. We need to leave tonight. What about your plans, the money you mentioned?" Lucas stared at her for a long moment, internal conflict evident in his face. Finally, he reached into his boot and extracted something from a hidden compartment in the heel. A silver badge that gleamed in the moonlight. "Pinkerton National Detective Agency," Abigail read aloud, stunned. "I'm an undercover operative," Lucas explained quietly. 6 months infiltrating the Blackwell gang to gather evidence of their connection to Randall Sterling, owner of Sterling Mining. Sterling orchestrates robberies of his own payrolls for insurance fraud. Abigail's mind raced, connecting pieces. "That's why Fredericks was on the stagecoach. He works for Sterling, and recognized you as the Pinkerton operative who investigated another of Sterling's operations last year," Lucas confirmed. "My taking you complicated everything. I'd nearly gathered all the evidence I needed, but now—" "My father," Abigail interrupted, a sudden realization dawning. "My father was Jonathan Thornton of First Boston Bank." Lucas nodded slowly. "The banker who allegedly embezzled funds and took his own life. I remember the case. He discovered financial irregularities in accounts controlled by Sterling Mining's Eastern investors," Abigail said, her voice tight with emotion. 3 weeks later, he was accused of embezzlement. The evidence against him was destroyed in a convenient fire, and he—" Her voice broke. Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. "Sterling framed your father to hide his own fraud, and now I'm accidentally in the midst of your investigation against him." Abigail laughed without humor. "Fate has a peculiar sense of irony." Lucas gripped her shoulders gently. "This changes everything. If Sterling learns your identity, you become even more valuable and dangerous to him. Then we must gather your evidence before Blackwell arrives," Abigail said decisively. "My father's name deserves clearing, and Sterling deserves justice. It's too dangerous." "I've been in danger since the moment your gang stopped our stagecoach," she countered. "At least this danger serves a purpose beyond survival." Lucas studied her with newfound respect. "The ledgers in the strongbox contain coded financial records. With your banking background, you might understand them better than I do." "Then let's begin," Abigail said, surprising herself with her determination. Tonight, working by candlelight in Lucas's cabin while the rest of the camp slept, they pored over the stolen ledgers. Abigail's experience with her father's banking records proved invaluable as she decoded Sterling's elaborate system of fraud. "Here," she said, pointing to a recurring pattern of numbers, "these are the insurance payments, far exceeding the actual losses, and these entries show distributions to B and others, Blackwell and the gang." "Exactly what I needed," Lucas said, copying the information into his own journal. "With this evidence and my testimony, we can bring down both Sterling and Blackwell." As dawn approached, they finalized their escape plan. Lucas would create a diversion the following night, allowing them to slip away with the documentary evidence. They would rendezvous with a federal marshal Lucas had alerted through coded message. "Get some rest," Lucas advised as he escorted her back to her cabin in the pre-dawn light. "Tomorrow will require all our strength." At her door, Abigail impulsively caught his hand. "Thank you for trusting me with the truth." Lucas's expression softened. His hand rose to brush a strand of hair from her face, lingering against her cheek. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met, Abigail Thornton." For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, professionalism reasserting itself. "Sleep well. Our work begins at nightfall." Chapter 4. Abigail had just settled onto her narrow bed when the cabin door burst open. Hank stood in the doorway, a revolver trained steadily on her. "Stop," he commanded. Quietly. "What's happening?" she asked, though she feared she already knew. "Figured it out," Hank said, his voice surprisingly conversational. "Reed's no outlaw. Spotted that Pinkerton badge when he thought no one was looking." Fear coursed through Abigail, but she kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it, girl. I was a deputy marshal before I turned outlaw. Know the type." He gestured with the gun. "Come on, we're gonna have a little chat, the three of us." He marched her to his cabin, where Lucas sat tied to a chair, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. He looked up when they entered, alarm flashing across his face when he saw Abigail. "She wasn't involved, Hank," Lucas said quickly. "This is between you and me." "Seems mighty involved to me," Hank replied, pushing Abigail into a second chair. "Conspiring with a lawman, decoding ledgers." "Yeah, I saw you two last night." To Abigail's surprise, Hank didn't tie her up. Instead, he pulled up a third chair and sat facing them both. "Here's how I see it," the older outlaw began. "Reed here is gathering evidence to bring down Blackwell and Sterling. Admirable work. But there's $5,000 in that strongbox, plus whatever Sterling pays for the ledgers. You're proposing a deal," Lucas said flatly. "Smart man," Hank nodded. "Help me eliminate Blackwell when he arrives. We split the money 3 ways. You two take your evidence and disappear east. I head south to Mexico. Everyone gets what they want." "Except justice," Lucas replied. "That money is stolen. Those ledgers are evidence." "Justice?" Hank laughed harshly. "In this territory, Sterling owns half the judges between here and Denver." While they argued, Abigail noticed movement outside the window, a shadowy figure observing them. "Reed. Even if I agreed," Lucas was saying, "how do I know you wouldn't shoot us both once Blackwell's eliminated?" "Because contrary to current appearances, I still have some honor," Hank replied. "Unlike Blackwell, I don't harm women or kill in cold blood." A soft knock interrupted them. Reed slipped inside, his dark eyes taking in the scene. "Trouble," he said simply. "Blackwell spotted 2 miles out, riding hard. 6 men with him." "Christ," Hank muttered. "Early again." He glanced between Lucas and Abigail. "Decision time, Reed. My deal or take your chances with Blackwell?" Before Lucas could answer, Reed spoke. "Third option." He moved with startling speed, striking Hank with the butt of his knife. The older man crumpled unconscious to the floor. "You knew?" Lucas asked as Reed cut his bonds. "Known for weeks," Reed replied, his usually stoic face revealing a hint of emotion. "Blackwell led raid on my mother's village. 10 dead. Been waiting for chance at justice." "And now?" Abigail asked, helping Lucas to his feet. "Now we run," Reed said. "I create diversion. You take evidence east to Marshall, waiting at Miller's Ford. I settle with Blackwell." "It's too dangerous," Lucas began. "No time to argue," Reed cut him off. "Take the girl, take ledgers. Fire starts in 10 minutes on west side of camp. Eastern path will be clear." The plan, executed with desperate precision, Reed's diversion, a fire in the empty storage cabin, drew the camp's attention, while Lucas and Abigail fled with the ledgers and minimal supplies. They rode double on Lucas's horse, pushing hard through mountain trails as a spring storm gathered above. The weather turned against them as thunder rolled across the mountains. Rain lashed down, turning the trail to treacherous mud. A particularly violent lightning strike spooked their mount, who reared and threw them both before galloping away with half their supplies. "Are you hurt?" Lucas helped Abigail to her feet, rain plastering her hair to her face. "Just bruised," she assured him, clutching the precious satchel containing the ledgers. "What now?" "We continue on foot. Miller's Ford is still 10 miles east." They struggled through the worsening storm, the temperature dropping dangerously as night fell. Abigail's teeth chattered uncontrollably, her sodden clothing offering no protection against the elements. "There," Lucas pointed through the downpour to a dark shape ahead, an abandoned trapper's cabin nestled against a rocky outcropping. "We can shelter until morning." Inside, the tiny one-room structure offered bare protection, a stone fireplace, rough wooden floor, and little else. Lucas quickly gathered what dry kindling remained and started a small fire, while Abigail examined their remaining supplies. "The ledgers are partially soaked," she reported, carefully separating pages near the growing flames. "But the evidence should remain legible." Lucas finally got the fire blazing properly. "We need to get out of these wet clothes," he said matter-of-factly. "Hypothermia is a greater threat than propriety at the moment." With practical efficiency, they arranged their outer garments near the fire to dry. Lucas gallantly offered Abigail his relatively dry undershirt, turning his back while she changed. They huddled near the flames, modesty maintained but uncomfortably aware of their proximity. "Tell me about your father," Lucas said softly as the storm raged outside. Abigail described Jonathan Thornton. His integrity, his kindness, his devastation when confronted with embezzlement charges. "He couldn't bear the disgrace," she finished, tears mingling with rainwater on her cheeks. "His last words to me were, 'The truth matters, Abigail. Never forget that.'" "We'll prove the truth," Lucas promised. "Starling will face justice." "And you?" she asked. "What drives Lucas Reed, Pinkerton detective?" He stared into the flames. "My father was a Union cavalry officer who became a sheriff after the war. He was killed by cattle rustlers when I was 17, men who later bought their freedom with stolen money. I learned then that justice needs champions willing to work in shadows, not just those standing in the light." As the fire's warmth slowly penetrated their chilled bodies, the barriers between them, social position, professional duty, circumstantial meeting, seemed to dissolve. Lucas's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. "In Boston, we would require at least 3 formal introductions before such familiarity," Abigail observed wryly, "and several months of chaperoned visits before discussing personal histories," Lucas added with a smile. "Yet here we are." Abigail turned to face him fully. "Protocols seem rather meaningless when one has been kidnapped, discovered a detective's true identity, and nearly frozen to death, all within a week's time." The firelight cast flickering shadows across Lucas's face as he studied her. "Abigail Thornton, you are remarkably adaptable for a Boston socialite." "Perhaps I was never meant for Boston drawing rooms," she replied softly. Something shifted in Lucas's expression, restraint giving way to resolve. His hand rose to cup her cheek, thumb brushing gently across her skin. "I shouldn't," he murmured, even as he leaned closer. "Propriety seems a distant concern," Abigail whispered before closing the remaining distance between them. The kiss began tentatively, a gentle question rather than a demand. When Abigail's arms slipped around his neck in clear answer, Lucas expanded the embrace, years of practiced control yielding to something far more powerful. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he began. "Let's survive first," Abigail replied with practical wisdom, "then discuss what comes after." They settled beside the fire. Abigail nestled against Lucas's chest as he maintained vigilant watch. Despite the danger still pursuing them, she felt an unexpected peace as sleep claimed her. The peace of having found, against all odds, someone who understood her completely. Chapter 1. Dawn exposed a clearing sky and troubling discovery. The quick check out the windows had revealed fresh hoof prints in the mud surrounding the cabin. "They've tracked us," Lucas said grimly, checking his revolver. "Jem and Theo most likely. They're the best trackers besides Reed." "What do we do?" Abigail asked, helping gather their still damp clothing. "We defend what we have," Lucas replied. "This cabin is actually fairly defensible. 1 door, 2 windows, solid walls." With grim efficiency, Lucas created makeshift defenses, overturning the single table as a barricade, positioning Abigail with a clear line of fire toward the door, establishing crude alarm systems with the few items available. "You know how to use this?" He offered her a small derringer from his boot, with a few extra rounds from his pocket. "Actually, yes." At his surprised expression, she explained, Our gardener in Boston was a former Union soldier. He taught me when I was 12, much to my mother's horror. Lucas's eyebrows rose appreciatively. Another surprising talent, Miss Thornton. I contain multitudes, Detective Reed, she replied with unexpected lightness, given their situation. As they completed preparations, Lucas paused, reaching into his pocket to extract a silver pocket watch. "This was my father's," he said quietly. "After the war, he told me it stopped a bullet at Gettysburg. Probably just a story, but I'd carry it on every mission." He pressed it into her hand. "Hold this for me." Touched by the gesture, Abigail unpinned the cameo brooch from her collar. "Then take this. My mother always said it brought protection to the women in our family." Their eyes met in silent acknowledgement of what they were truly exchanging. Not just tokens, but promises. The attack began without warning, a fusillade of bullets splintering the window frames and thudding into the cabin's log walls. Abigail ducked instinctively, then steadied herself, remembering Lucas's instructions to wait for clear targets. Through her damaged window, she glimpsed one of the outlaws darting between trees, a torch in his hand. Taking a deep breath, she sighted carefully along her Derringer barrel, then squeezed the trigger. The report seemed thunderous in the confined space. The man stumbled, dropping the torch as her bullet found his shoulder. "Good shot," Lucas approved, firing his own weapon at a target beyond her view. For several minutes, the exchange continued. Disciplined shots from within meeting increasingly reckless fire from the frustrated attackers. The besiegers, clearly expecting easy prey, found themselves stymied by the coordinated defense. "They're pulling back," Lucas observed during a lull. "Regrouping." The sound of approaching hoofbeats reached them, multiple horses moving at a controlled pace. 5 riders emerged from the tree line. Leading them was a distinguished figure with iron-gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard, riding a powerful black stallion. Beside him rode a well-dressed gentleman Abigail recognized with shock. "Sterling himself," Lucas confirmed grimly. "And Blackwell." "Miss Thornton," Sterling called, urging his horse forward. "Be reasonable. Your position is untenable. Surrender the ledgers, and I give you my word you'll reach Denver unharmed." "The word of a man who framed my father," Abigail replied with quiet fury. "Your father was a fool," Sterling retorted, his cultured facade slipping. "He discovered my arrangements and threatened exposure unless I made significant charitable contributions to offset the moral imbalance, as he put it." A harsh laugh escaped him. "Imagine attempting to blackmail me into philanthropy." The casual confirmation of her father's innocence sent a surge of vindication through Abigail. He was attempting to give you a chance at redemption, something you clearly didn't deserve. "Enough reminiscing," Blackwell interrupted impatiently. "Reed, you have 1 minute to surrender the ledgers and the woman. After that, my men storm the cabin." Lucas turned to Abigail, his expression grave. "They'll rush us from multiple directions. We can't hold them all off." He withdrew a folded paper sealed with wax. "This is my official statement documenting everything with my badge enclosed. If anything happens to me, keep it safe along with the ledger." "Nothing is happening to either of us," Abigail insisted. Outside, Blackwell's men were spreading out, preparing for the final assault. Time had run out for planning or escape. "When they come," Lucas said quietly, "aim for the ones coming through the door first. I'll cover the windows." His hand briefly covered hers. "Whatever happens, Abigail, meeting you has been—" The rest of his words were lost as the front of the cabin exploded in a hail of gunfire. Bullets splintered the door and shattered what remained of the windows. Lucas returned fire methodically, dropping one man who attempted to rush the door, while Abigail focused on a second attacker approaching from the side. "Running low," Lucas warned after several minutes of intense exchange, referring to their dwindling ammunition. Abigail had just 2 shots remaining when a new sound cut through the chaos, a clear, piercing whistle from the ridge behind the cabin, followed by answering calls from multiple directions. "Federal marshals," a commanding voice shouted. "Drop your weapons, you're surrounded." The gunfire from Blackwell's men faltered as blue uniformed figures appeared on the surrounding ridges. What had been an outlaw assault suddenly transformed into a three-way confrontation. "It's Marshal Blake," Lucas said with relief. "Reed must have gotten through with my signal." Through her window, Abigail witnessed the tide turning with breathtaking speed. Several outlaws immediately surrendered while others attempted to flee only to find retreat routes blocked. Blackwell made a desperate stand until 3 marshals fired simultaneously. The outlaw leader toppled from his saddle, dead before he struck the ground. Sterling, seeing the battle lost, spurred his horse toward a gap in the marshal's line. One of his men provided covering fire, allowing the mine owner to disappear into the dense forest. "Sterling escaping," Abigail cried. Lucas pushed open the cabin door, calling out to identify himself to the marshals. As they exited, the morning sun illuminated a landscape transformed by conflict. Marshals securing prisoners, wounded men being tended, horses being gathered. Marshal Blake approached, a tall man with a weathered face and a badge gleaming on his chest. "Perfect timing, Reed," Lucas greeted him gratefully. "Your Native American friend made sure we knew exactly where to find you," Blake replied, disappeared again as soon as he'd delivered his message. Sterling got away. Blake continued grimly, "Headed northeast. I've got men in pursuit." "The old mining shaft," Abigail realized suddenly. Mr. Sterling mentioned it in the stagecoach as a personal retreat where he could escape business demands. "It's less than 2 miles from here." Blake dispatched riders in the indicated direction, and despite his protests, Abigail insisted on accompanying the party. "I know what the entrance looks like from his description." Minutes later, Abigail found herself riding alongside Lucas and 4 marshals toward Sterling's hideout. The abandoned mining operation appeared suddenly among the trees, a dilapidated structure covering the shaft entrance, with a small cabin nearby that showed signs of recent use. "Randall Sterling, Federal Marshals," Blake announced. "Come out with your hands visible." When no response came, the marshals approached cautiously. Suddenly, Sterling burst from the mine entrance, making directly for the horses. He reached the nearest mount, slashed its tether, and vaulted into the saddle with surprising agility. "Stop him!" Blake shouted, firing a warning shot. As Sterling's horse approached their position, Abigail made an instinctive decision. She stepped into its path, causing the animal to rear. Sterling fought to control it, momentarily distracted long enough for a deputy to grab at the bridle. Sterling lashed out with his riding crop, striking the deputy across the face before turning the same weapon on Abigail. The stinging blow across her shoulder barely registered as she seized his arm, using all her weight to pull him from the saddle. They tumbled to the ground together. "You ruined everything!" Sterling spat, lunging at her with unexpected ferocity. "Your father couldn't leave well enough alone, and neither can you." "He was twice the man you are," Abigail retorted, continuing to back away. "He tried to give you a chance to make things right." "Right?" Sterling laughed bitterly. "There's no right or wrong in business, only profit and loss." He reached inside his coat, producing a small derringer. Time seemed to slow as he raised the weapon. Abigail saw Lucas running toward them, shouting a warning. She saw Marshal Blake taking aim, too far for accuracy. In that stretched moment, Abigail's hand found the knife Lucas had given her days ago. With a fluid motion born of desperation, she drew and threw it in a single movement. The small blade struck Sterling's outstretched arm just as he fired, sending the bullet harmlessly into the ground. He howled in pain as Lucas finally reached them, tackling the mine owner with crushing force. "Are you hurt?" Lucas demanded, his voice tight with fear. "No," Abigail assured him, though she trembled with the aftermath of adrenaline. He missed. "Damn lucky throw," Blake commented, examining the knife embedded in Sterling's forearm. "Where'd a Boston society lady learn to throw a knife like that?" "I didn't," Abigail admitted. "I was aiming for his chest." Despite the tension, Lucas laughed. "Remind me never to underestimate you, Miss Thornton." As Sterling was secured, Abigail confronted him one final time. "My father died believing the world thought him a thief. But I promise you this, the world will know the truth now. His name will be cleared, and yours will be synonymous with fraud and murder." Sterling spat defiance. Ambitious claims, who would believe you over me? I have connections, political influence, and documented evidence of your crimes, Marshal Blake interrupted, holding up the ledgers, along with multiple witnesses. Your connections won't save you from the gallows this time. As Sterling was led away, Lucas's hand found Abigail's, fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both new and somehow familiar. It's over, he said softly. You'll face trial in Denver. With these ledgers and our testimony, your father's name will be cleared. What happens now? Abigail asked, suddenly aware of how completely her life had been transformed in less than a week. Now, Lucas replied, his voice warming. We return to civilization. Chapter 6. The Denver Pacific Railway Station bustled with unusual activity as their train arrived. Platform attendants handled luggage while a crowd of onlookers pressed against barriers, necks craning for a glimpse of the passengers who would become overnight sensations through newspaper accounts of the Blackwell gang's capture. News travels fast, Lucas observed, adjusting his tie nervously. Inside the station's private salon, a tall, elegantly dressed woman in her 50s waited. Abigail! Constance Hartford rushed forward, propriety briefly abandoned as she embraced her niece. My dear girl, what an ordeal you've endured. I'm quite well, Aunt Constance, Abigail assured her, thanks in large part to Detective Reed. Constance turned assessing eyes toward Lucas. Detective Reed, I understand from Marshal Blake's telegrams that I owe you my niece's safe return. Miss Thornton secured her own safe return through remarkable courage, ma'am, Lucas replied formally. I was merely performing my duty. The salon door burst open, admitting the flustered figure of Mrs. Lavinia Hargrove. Miss Thornton, she exclaimed, preserved through divine providence and my own desperate intercessions with those terrible outlaws. She collapsed dramatically into a chair. I insisted they take me instead, of course. Spare the innocent girl, I told their leader. Abigail bit her lip to prevent an inappropriate smile, catching Lucas's equally amused glance. As they prepared to depart, Lucas approached to take his leave. Miss Thornton, he said formally, I'll call at your aunt's residence tomorrow to review your statement for the official record, if that's convenient. Of course, Detective Reed, she replied with equal formality, though their eyes held a private communication that transcended the stilted words. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of changes. Abigail's story dominated Denver newspapers, transforming the scandal of her father's disgrace into a heroic narrative of a daughter seeking justice. Evidence from the captured ledgers allowed investigators to re-examine Jonathan Thornton's case, leading to formal recognition of his innocence and the restoration of the Thornton estate. Aunt Constance, capitalizing on Abigail's newfound celebrity, orchestrated her introduction to Denver society with strategic precision. A heroine is always welcome, she declared, especially one with your background and restored prospects. Central to Constance's plans was Edward Hammond, the handsome son of the Pinkerton regional director. Recently appointed vice president of Frontier National Bank at only 28, Constance noted meaningfully. Most eligible. Meanwhile, Lucas maintained professional distance during the investigation's conclusion, their interactions limited to formal interviews and the occasional stilted meeting in Aunt Constance's carefully chaperoned parlor. The connection that had flourished in the wilderness seemed to wither under civilization's constraints. The situation came to a head when Abigail received news of Lucas' reassignment. San Francisco, Constance announced with poorly concealed satisfaction, effective immediately following Sterling's arraignment. The Pinkerton agency apparently requires his particular skills for an important case. That evening, Abigail made a decision. Using the excuse of a headache, she persuaded Edward Hammond to escort her from a literary salon to the Denver train station instead of home. A document that must be delivered before the evening westbound departs, she explained. She found Lucas on the platform, supervising the loading of his trunk. Miss Thornton, he greeted her with surprise. This is unexpected. I've read your journal, she said without preamble, abandoning social niceties. I understand you've decided that differences in our situations make continued connection impossible, despite evidence that those same differences didn't prevent genuine feeling from developing between us. Lucas glanced around uncomfortably. Abigail, this isn't the place for such a discussion. And when would be the place after you've disappeared to San Francisco? She took a steadying breath. You wrote that what flourished in extremity cannot survive in the ordinary world. I believe you're wrong. Your aunt has re-established you in Denver's society, he countered. Your inheritance will soon be restored. That future, security, respectability, is what you deserve. And you believe you know what I deserve better than I do myself? Abigail challenged. The same woman who helped capture the Blackwell gang is somehow incapable of determining her own heart's direction? All aboard, called the conductor, the final boarding call heightening the urgency of their exchange. Abigail, my life is not conducive to the security any woman deserves. I travel constantly, often in danger, sometimes under false identities. Perhaps I don't want security above all else, she replied quietly. Perhaps what I value most is purpose, partnership, and a life that matters beyond drawing room accomplishments and suitable marriages. The train whistle blew shrilly. Lucas glanced toward the waiting cars, conflict evident in his face. I must go. The agency expects me in San Francisco by week's end. Abigail stepped back, dignity reasserting itself. Then go, Lucas. But know this. I'm not the passive society woman you've convinced yourself I must become. When you realize that, you know where to find me. 3 weeks later, the governor's ball marked the pinnacle of Denver's summer social season. The event had taken on additional significance with the announcement that formal commendations would be presented to those instrumental in capturing the Blackwell gang. Abigail entered on Edward Hammond's arm, resplendent in a midnight blue silk gown with silver embroidery. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers while a string orchestra played from a raised dais. Governor Eaton approached, resplendent in formal attire. Ms. Thornton, the guest we've been most eager to welcome. Your courage has brought great credit to our territory. The evening proceeded with dancing, refreshments, and carefully modulated conversation. During a brief respite between partners, Abigail was approached by Director Hammond. Ms. Thornton, he began without preamble. The Pinkerton Agency occasionally employs women for specialized work, matters requiring feminine insight or access where male operatives would be conspicuous. Might such a possibility interest you? The unexpected offer momentarily robbed Abigail of speech. I would certainly consider such an opportunity, Director Hammond. After the orchestra concluded their selection, the governor approached the dais for his formal address and presentation of commendations. Marshal Blake received the first, followed by representatives from territorial law enforcement. We also recognize the extraordinary courage of one who was first victim, then catalyst for justice, the governor continued, turning toward Abigail. Miss Abigail Thornton, whose intelligence and bravery contributed significantly to the successful resolution of this case. As Abigail moved forward to accept her commendation, she experienced a moment of clarity. This world of carefully managed appearances felt hollow compared to the raw authenticity she had experienced with Lucas. Thank you, Governor Eaton, she began, departing from her prepared text. My father always taught me that true wealth lies in using whatever advantages we possess to improve the world around us. Therefore, I am pleased to announce the establishment of the Thornton Foundation for Frontier Children, dedicated to supporting orphans created by violence in our western territories. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd at this philanthropic declaration. Edward Hammond beamed with proprietary pride at what he clearly considered a socially advantageous announcement by his presumptive future wife. Additionally, Abigail continued, her voice strengthening, I will be providing consultative services to the Pinkerton National Detective Agency in matters relating to financial crimes, particularly those targeting vulnerable citizens. This second announcement created a more complex reaction, surprise, confusion, and in some quarters, distinct disapproval. As the implications registered around the ballroom, the main doors opened to admit a late arrival. Conversation briefly paused as heads turned toward the newcomer. Lucas Reed stood in the doorway, impeccably formal in evening attire. His gaze moved directly to Abigail, ignoring the curious stares his appearance generated. "Detective Reed!" Governor Eaton exclaimed. "We had understood you were unable to attend due to reassignment. Please join us." Lucas made his way through the crowd, accepting the governor's commendation before turning to Abigail. "Miss Thornton," he said formally, though his eyes conveyed far more than his words, "your speech was most illuminating." "Detective Reed," she replied with equal formality. "We had understood you were bound for San Francisco. I declined the assignment," he stated simply. "Some matters in Denver required my personal attention." Constance materialized beside them, social damage control evident in her posture. "Detective Reed, what an unexpected pleasure. I'm certain many here wish to congratulate you. Perhaps you might circulate while Miss Thornton rests before the final dances? Mr. Hammond has reserved the last waltz." "Actually, Aunt," Abigail interjected smoothly, "I'd appreciate a moment on the terrace for fresh air. Detective Reed, would you escort me?" The terrace extended along the mansion's western face, offering views of moonlit mountains. Once beyond earshot of others, Abigail turned to Lucas directly. "You declined San Francisco. May I ask why?" Lucas faced her fully, moonlight silvering his features. "Because you were right, and I was wrong. What we found together isn't confined to extreme circumstances. It exists here, too, if we have the courage to claim it." "Even knowing I intend to work with the Pinkerton Agency?" she asked, a smile playing at her lips. "Especially knowing that," he replied, answering smile warming his eyes. "Director Hammond informed me of his offer. He seemed to think we might work well together on certain cases." "Abigail," Lucas took her hands in his, propriety momentarily set aside. "I won't pretend the path forward is simple or conventional. My work remains dangerous, often requiring travel. Your new foundation will demand attention. The combination is unprecedented, possibly scandalous by current standards." "Scandalous?" She pretended to consider this assessment. "Like being abducted by outlaws? Or perhaps like announcing professional ambitions at the governor's ball?" His laugh, warm, genuine, unrestrained, confirmed the transformation in their relationship. "When you frame it that way, it seems we're already well beyond conventional boundaries." The orchestra inside struck up the final waltz, the music spilling through open windows. A reminder of Edward Hammond waiting for his claimed dance and social expectations defied by their choices. "They're playing our song, Detective Reed," Abigail said with gentle mockery. "Shall we shock Denver society further by dancing together?" "I believe in thorough work, Miss Thornton," Lucas replied, offering his arm. "If we're to scandalize Denver, let's do it properly." Chapter 7. 3 months later, Abigail reviewed correspondence at her desk in the newly established Thornton Foundation offices. Through her window, she could see the distant Rocky Mountains wearing their first dusting of snow. She picked up a letter bearing a Montana postmark, smiling as she recognized Maisie's distinctive handwriting. The older woman had declined Abigail's offer of a position at the foundation, instead accepting a post as head cook at a reformed girls' school near Helena. "These wild young things need proper feeding and no nonsense," Maisie had written. A penciled postscript added intriguing news. "Army lieutenant passed through. Says Reed's been hired as scout for the 4th Cavalry, keeping his tribal markings covered but doing what he does best, finding paths others miss." A knock at her office door heralded Lucas's unexpected arrival. "I was hoping you might accompany me to view a property outside the city," he said, an unusual tension evident in his normally composed demeanor. "It's about an hour's ride. If you're agreeable." Intrigued, Abigail quickly changed into her practical riding habit. Within 30 minutes, they were mounted on excellent horses, leaving Denver's bustling streets for open country. After nearly an hour, Lucas guided them off the main path onto a narrower track. As they emerged from the trees, Abigail drew her horse to a halt, momentarily speechless at the vista before her. A small, sheltered valley opened up, cradled by protective ridges on 3 sides, while offering spectacular views on the 4th. A clear stream meandered through its center, bordered by cottonwoods. Against the eastern ridge stood a well-constructed cabin with a wide porch. "Lucas," she breathed, taking in the scene. "It's beautiful. The resemblance to the canyon where we first began to know each other," he finished, "though considerably more accessible and without outlaws in residence." They dismounted near the cabin, tethering their horses. Inside, the space was already furnished with simple but quality pieces. Bookshelves lined one wall, currently empty but promising future contentment. "You've purchased this already," she realized. "It's yours." "Actually," Lucas replied, guiding her back onto the porch where the afternoon sun bathed them in golden light, "I was hoping it might be ours." From his pocket he withdrew a small leather pouch similar to those they had used during their wilderness journey. Inside lay not jerky or matches, but a simple gold ring set with a sapphire that caught the sunlight in brilliant flashes. "Abigail Thornton," he began, emotion evident in his voice. "Our beginning was anything but conventional. What started as a stagecoach robbery became the most important journey of my life, not just across wilderness terrain, but toward understanding what truly matters." He took her hand, the ring held carefully between them. "This land offers both adventure and security, wild enough to explore, safe enough to build upon, rather like what I believe we could create together. You remember I insisted on being consulted about decisions affecting us both," she reminded him, voice warm with affection. "I believe this qualifies as proper consultation. Then may I have your answer? Will you marry me, Abigail? Build a life here that balances the security you deserve with the purpose and partnership you desire." "Yes," she replied simply, allowing him to slide the ring onto her finger, "though I reserve the right to continue my foundation work alongside whatever adventures we undertake together. I would expect nothing less." Later, as sunset painted the distant peaks in hues of rose and gold, they discussed their future with the same collaborative spirit that had gotten them through wilderness perils. "The foundation work continues, of course," Abigail stated firmly, "and Director Hammond has approved my proposal to establish a Colorado branch of the agency," Lucas explained. "Headquarters in Denver. Less undercover work, more consultative operations." As twilight deepened around them, Lucas reached into his pocket once more. "I have one more thing for you." He removed a small silver locket on a delicate chain. "Open it." Inside, Abigail found two treasures carefully preserved beneath glass. Pressed wildflowers from the meadow near the trapper's cabin, where they had made their last stand, and a tiny replica of a Pinkerton badge. "To remember where we began," Lucas explained softly, "and to celebrate where we're going." As he fastened the necklace around her throat, Abigail felt the weight of the locket settle against her skin, a tangible reminder of their extraordinary journey from captive and captor to equal partners. "One more journey we must make," she said, turning to face him in the gathering dusk. "To Boston to visit my father's grave. I want to tell him that his name has been cleared, that Sterling will face justice, and that I've found happiness he would approve of despite its unconventional nature." As darkness embraced their mountain valley, they remained together on the porch of what would become their home, planning a future that honored both their individual strengths and their shared journey. The road from Boston society lady to Frontier Foundation director had been neither straight nor smooth, but Abigail wouldn't have changed a single step. Not even the terrifying moment when outlaws had stopped her stagecoach. "It's strange to think," she mused, "that if not for that robbery, we would never have met." "Not a chance," Lucas corrected gently. "I was assigned to that stagecoach specifically tracking Sterling's connection to the robberies." "Then perhaps fate," Abigail suggested, touching the locket at her throat. "What began with a theft ended with the greatest find of all."